Welcome, everyone, to this year's Annual Luncheon. It's really a pleasure to see so many familiar faces, and we want to welcome new guests to our Annual Luncheon as well. I'd like to introduce someone to you. Meet Quinn Collins Burgard. Quinn, 10 years old, and his twin sister Nora, and his mom, Ann Collins Burgard, traveled from Santa Barbara this August to spend a week vacationing in Big Sur. And despite the Big Sur fires, August 23rd, Tuesday, was a clear and a crisp day, and Quinn and his twin sister Nora were doing what 10-year-olds do. They were out riding their bike, having a great time. And in an instant, everything changed. Quinn was balancing on his bike, balancing on the pedals, trying to hold his balance while the bike was standing still, and suddenly the handlebars torqued, and Quinn lost his balance, and he fell to the ground. He didn't get up. Nora noticed that Quinn was having great difficulty breathing. He seemed to be choking. So she ran to get help from her mom and other adults. Meanwhile, an employee of the campground had noticed Quinn's incident and went to help. By the time the adults returned to Quinn's side, this Good Samaritan was performing a Heimlich maneuver. And honestly, there was a collective sigh of relief when suddenly a fully formed lemon drop was spit out of Quinn's mouth. Crisis averted. No, crisis not averted. You see, as Quinn was falling, he struck his neck. Actually, he struck his larynx directly on the handlebars. Now, the larynx is an underappreciated and elegant organ. It's really small, but it's the intersection of three important functions: speech, breathing, and swallowing. See, at the top of the larynx sits the epiglottis. It's a trap door that allows us to swallow food and prevents the food from getting into our lungs. Below the epiglottis, in the larynx, in the tubular larynx, sits two vocal cords that allow us to speak. And below that is a tubular larynx that transmits air down into the trachea and into the lungs. And this is what, when Quinn fell, he crushed his larynx. So when the family arrived and they found Quinn really struggling to breathe, they transported him, packed him up in the car, and brought him to the nearby Big Sur Health Clinic. Someone, in the meantime, summoned 911. At the Big Sur Health Clinic, Quinn was immediately taken into the clinic and given oxygen, and the staff did their best to try to calm him down and improve his breathing. Quinn's not an anxious boy. In fact, I've heard from his parents that he's described as Mr. Chill, that he's a pretty calm kid. But on that day, with the difficulty he was experiencing, he looked to his mom and he whispered, "I'm dying. I'm dying." Shortly thereafter, the paramedics arrived, and they assessed Quinn. And they had an important decision to make, perhaps even a life and death decision. They had to decide, are we going to summon a helicopter, an air ambulance, and have the air ambulance fly into Big Sur, pick up Quinn, and transport him to Natividad Medical Center, the closest trauma center? Or are we going to load everyone up in the ambulance and head up from Big Sur to Monterey to Community Hospital? The team of paramedics decided on the latter, and they immediately placed Quinn and his mom Ann in the ambulance and made the tortuous, the windy 28-mile journey up Highway 1. Those 28 miles, that was the longest 28-mile journey in Quinn's life. First 15 miles, he was doing well, focusing on the light at the top of the ambulance, in the ceiling of the ambulance cab. But the last 5-10 miles, his breathing got more and more difficult. He was experiencing laryngospasm. His vocal cords that had been injured were spasming closed. And there was swelling, and there was bleeding, and all of that resulted in a great deal of difficulty. By the time that Quinn got to our hospital, he was experiencing real shortness of breath His oxygen levels were dipping. He was in serious respiratory distress. After a quick assessment in our emergency department, he was immediately brought to our operating room. And there he met Dr. Joel Nagafuchi, a pediatric anesthesiologist, and Dr. Stephen Vetter, an ear, nose, and throat surgeon. Dr. Nagafuchi's job was to really control Quinn's breathing, improve his oxygen level, and really that's the job of any anesthesiologist, to breathe for a patient while they're sedated. And given the chaotic and labored breathing that Dr. Nagafuchi was witnessing, he sedated Quinn and started breathing for him with a mask and a bag. He then looked quickly to see if he could put in a breathing tube to assist in Quinn's breathing. And as an anesthesiologist, Dr. Nagafuchi looks at airways 10, 12, 15 times every day. He has literally visualized thousands of airways, the familiar landscape, the vocal cords, the epiglottis. Couldn't be seen. It was completely unrecognizable. And he knew he couldn't place a breathing tube. Dr. Vetter, meanwhile, knew exactly what needed to be done, and he decisively began performing a tracheotomy. Tracheotomy, he made an incision and put a breathing tube down below the area of injury into the trachea so that we could control and maintain Quinn's breathing. Crisis averted? No, crisis not averted. You see, because even though a tracheostomy was in place, while Quinn's larynx had been injured, additional air had traveled along his chest wall and had collapsed his right lung. So he was really essentially working on one lung. Fortunately, Dr. Mark Vieira, a general surgeon and the chief of our Department of Surgery, had been monitoring the situation. He too was in the operating room. He recognized what needed to be done. He placed a chest tube and was able to expand Quinn's right lung. Crisis averted? Yes, crisis averted. At this time, we had control of the airway. Quinn's vital signs improved. His oxygen levels got better. He was sedated, and he was transported to the intensive care unit for additional monitoring, care, and stabilization. While Quinn was in the operating room, the family had the chance to meet Dr. Jill Arola, a pediatrician who was the attending physician assigned to Quinn's case. Dr. Arola would oversee Quinn's care in the intensive care unit. Ironically, Dr. Arola had experience with her brother requiring a tracheotomy as well as a young man. So she could share her own personal experience with the family as she described what was happening to Quinn. She was a constant source of information, a liaison, and continued to provide the comfort and the support that the family needed during the time here at the hospital. Dr. Arola then set about working to find a definitive place for Quinn's laryngeal injury to be treated. There's not a lot of places where you can have your larynx reconstructed. It's not something that's done in most hospitals in the United States. Fortunately, Dr. Arola was able to get in touch with Dr. Doug Seidel, an ear, nose, and throat surgeon at Stanford who specializes in airway reconstruction. And a few hours later, the second leg of Quinn's journey was underway as he headed in an air ambulance, a helicopter, up to Palo Alto. Unfortunately, Quinn was sufficiently sedated that he couldn't really remember much of the trip. Once at Stanford, Quinn was further assessed with a CT scan and additional tests, and the next day he was brought to the operating room for what was anticipated to be a 2-hour exploratory operation. Instead, he underwent a 7.5-hour reconstruction. Dr. Seidel placed a stent, which he used almost as a construction scaffolding upon which he could rebuild the trachea. I need to tell you, Quinn was a rock star. He did really well. He tolerated the surgery, and his postoperative course was remarkable. He initially required a feeding tube and a tracheostomy, and when it was time to leave the hospital, he still had to go home with a tracheostomy. This was the end of August, early September. That summer turned into fall, and fall turned into winter, and he still needed a tracheostomy tube down into from his skin out down into his trachea. And at some point, as he continued to improve, Dr. Seidel was able to remove the tracheostomy. So Quinn was just left with a healing, small surgical hole right here in his neck. And really, this was some of the most frustrating time because Quinn likes to do what 10-year-olds like to do. He wanted to go swimming. Can't swim with a hole in your neck. So Christmas rolls around, family decides, we've been through a lot, time for us to go on a vacation. So I headed to a hotel up in the mountains, and every day dressing gets changed, and every day that hole is smaller. And then finally, a few days before Christmas, there is no longer any hole. And after checking carefully, Quinn took the last leg of his journey. We are so fortunate to have Quinn Collins-Burgard and his moms, Ann and Beth Collins-Burgard, here to join us today, and we really appreciate you allowing us to tell Quinn's remarkable story. We are so proud of the great work you've done. Congratulations. At the family's table, we also have Dr. Arola, Dr. Vetter, Dr. Vieira, and Dr. Nagafuchi, the physicians who had the opportunity to care for Quinn. And it's just we're so happy to see you. I think most of us in the room are thinking, boy, Quinn was really lucky. There's a lot of luck involved, and I would agree. I mean, how lucky were we that Nora, Quinn's twin sister, was there to see his distress and call for help right away? How lucky were we that the Big Sur Health Clinic was just right down the road, and that there happened to be an ambulance there because of the fires that were raging in the area, and so there was a paramedic unit right there. How lucky were we that they decided to make the ground transport, and that we had a team of talented physicians, surgeons, nurses, respiratory therapists to care for Quinn when he arrived. Yeah, it's luck. It also this outcome also is a result of training, preparation, and talent. And what we've worked on doing for the last several decades at Community Hospital is always trying to ensure that we have the skilled staff to be able to provide care for you and your family whenever you need that care. And we never know when that care is going to arise, when that need's going to arise, and we absolutely never know exactly what that care is going to entail. It's tough bringing physicians to the Monterey Peninsula. Hard to believe given the beautiful area that we live in. Cost of living is high. So for the last 15 years, Community Hospital has maintained and operated a physician recruitment assistance program. And that physician assistance recruitment program allows us to bring really talented, highly trained, dedicated physicians of a variety of specialties to our community. And some of the physicians who cared for Quinn that day were here in this community as a result of our physician assistance recruitment program. That program, in turn, is made possible as a result of gifts from members of our community and the long-standing philanthropy we enjoy in our community. So in many ways, many of you in this room participated and are responsible for Quinn's care. And for that, I thank you. I want to just close by thanking you, first of all, by saying that every day when I come to work, I'm incredibly proud of the dedication and the quality of service that is provided by our 2,200 employees at Community Hospital and at the other companies in Montage Health, Community Health Innovations, Aspire, Montage Medical Group, Montage Wellness Centers. We consider it an honor and a privilege to care for our community, for our neighbors, our friends, our family, and I want to thank you for entrusting us with your care, and I want to wish you just a great afternoon. Thanks for coming.